And good morning, everybody, and thank you for attending the first Audit Committee meeting of 2022. And if it's not too late in January, I'd say Happy New Year to everybody. We've got a couple of changes to the personnel at the committee at the minute. Councillor Murphy has left the committee and is replaced by Councillor Grimshaw, who unfortunately can't be with us today because has unfortunately tested positive for COVID-19, which is a shame, but hope she's better soon. And Councillor Taylor has left the committee and is replaced by Councillor Dale. So welcome to the committee again, Councillor Dale, a long-time member of this committee as a chair in a previous life. Okay, thank you. Okay, thank you. Good. Okay, so we've had apologies for our absence. Any more apologies, Leslie?
Apologies also from Councillor Scott.
Councillor Scott, thank you. Okay, well, we are quorate, so we will continue on. Second point on the agenda, the minutes of the last meeting. As usual, I'm not proposing to go through these line by line. Everybody's had, I think, ample time to read them. Has anybody got any questions, any problems or omissions in these minutes? No? Can I have a proposal that we accept the minutes? Yeah, Councillor Oliver, second. Thank you, Councillor. So the minutes are accepted as a good record of the last meeting. Item 3, the disclosure of members' interests. Unless already entered in the Council's register of members' interests, members are required to disclose any personal interest, which includes any disposable pecuniary interest they may have in any of the items included on the agenda for this meeting in accordance with the Code of Conduct. And as usual, if anybody wants to make note now of any interest. No, nothing. Okay, moving on. Item number 4, the report of the Interim Executive Director of Finance and the Section 151 Officer. Now, we usually have Jan on the line for this. I'm not sure if she's there.
Yes, I'm here, Chair.
Oh, hello, welcome, Jan.
Thank you.
And Happy New Year.
And to you too.
Okay, thank you. So over to you, Jan.
Yes, so I'm going to just briefly introduce the report with your permission, Chair, and then I have my colleague or colleagues Andy Stewart and Alison Elsden also on the call to answer any detailed question that members may have. So the Treasury Management Strategy sets out our plans for the forthcoming year. It includes Treasury management limits, including borrowing limits and limits on the maturity spread of borrowing to ensure that the Council is not exposed to interest rate risk. Also includes the prudential indicators that we're required to report to the committee and our policy on minimum revenue provision and annual investment strategy. So I think the context for this strategy is we're in a low interest environment, but there is considerable uncertainty about the economic outlook with inflation at historic levels and still rising. So the strategy is predicated on the forecast that interest rates will remain relatively low, but we are expecting to see a steady rise over the next 12 months. But we are keeping a watching brief because it is possible that the Bank of England will look to increase interest rates more quickly than we're currently expecting if inflation continues to run ahead of the current forecasts. So we start the year with significant cash balances, and that means that we are in a position of under borrowing for the forthcoming year. So in other words, we'll be using our cash balances rather than going to the markets to undertake more borrowing. But although that is beneficial to the Council because at the moment we're not earning any significant returns on our cash balances, and therefore there is no need to incur external borrowing with all the attendant servicing costs. There is a risk associated with that if medium to long-term interest rates move sharply during the year. That may leave us in an exposed position. So we will need to keep a very close eye on that. Other than that, Chair, I wasn't planning to make any further remarks by way of introduction to the report, but as I said, I and my fellow officers are happy to take any questions.
Okay, thank you for that, Jan. I'll open this up to the floor if anybody has anything to ask about that introduction. No, that's fair. Councillor Oliver.
There's a couple of questions I was just going to ask about. So one was around the MRP policy, and there was sort of different elements to the MRP policy, and one of the elements was a sort of 50-year straight line, effectively depreciation on assets before 2008. I was just a question, curious as to, is that normal? Is that, because that's quite different to the policy for the remaining assets, which was I think to do with the life of the asset, and so is that is that a normal way for councils to deal with that and just take aggregate everything that's old and just apply a 50-year rule to that?
Sorry, let me unmute myself. MRP is calculated on the basis of the expected useful life of the relevant asset class. So we do apply a different period to each class of assets, but we don't do that at the level of individual assets, Councillor Oliver. So, for example, vehicles would not have the same useful life as, say, a leisure centre or a school. So we do take account of that in calculating the MRP. But so far as the borrowing is concerned, that is simply aggregated. So we don't take out borrowing at the level of individual assets or even classes of assets. All of our borrowing requirements are aggregated. And then in accordance with the strategy, we ensure that we have the appropriate maturity spread for that borrowing. So I hope that answers your question.
Yes, thank you. And the other question was around the ratio between net revenue and borrowing, which was is forecast, and these forecasts effectively never become true because there's always sort of underspend in the capital programme, but that's rising from 7.2% last year to 15% next year, which is quite a big jump. And are you comfortable with that?
Yes, there's a specific reason for that. And you'll notice that in 24-25, there's also a jump. And that is because we are using some of our reserves to make a voluntary minimum revenue provision, £25 million in 22-23, and then a further, I think it's 7.8 million in 24-25. And the reason for that is as additions are made to the capital programme, and we have the ability to do that because, as I've said, we start the year with significant cash balances, but also very significant reserves. We're able to effectively front load the MRP associated with that additional capital investment so that the future strain on the revenue account is minimised. So it does look a bit odd, but you'll see that I think it's in 25-26 that ratio falls back, and that's because the capital financing costs include the MRP. It's not just the interest, but it's MRP and interest. So by front loading, we're making sure that there isn't an increasing strain on the revenue account in future years. So it's a bit like buying a car, out for your savings rather than taking out some loan finance that you then have to pay over a number of years, or buying a house, with your cash savings as opposed to taking out a mortgage. Yeah. It's a similar sort of principle, and it's just to smooth the impact on the revenue account further down line and ensure that that remains within affordable limits. Clearly, it's not something that we can do on a regular basis, but in the current circumstances, you know, that's something that, you know, I think is prudent, because otherwise, you know, those ratios from 22-23 onwards would see a significant increase, so we thought it was sensible to use that flexibility that we currently have.
That seems very prudent. Thank you very much.
Okay. Right. Jan, was that you complete for this item?
Yes, Chair, if there are no further questions, I'd just ask the committee to approve.
We have two further questions. I'll take Councillor.
Okay.
I'll take Councillor Dale and then
Okay, I'll
Peter.
put this paper and then you can hear me. Just, Jan, on page 15, the economic outlook at November 21. I just wanted to know there's significant risks concerning the future at the moment because of the rise in all kinds of things. Everything's going up. The amount of taxes that are being put on everybody is enormous. Looking forward, we are looking at people where we have really got real poverty in some areas. Do you think that the strategy actually takes on board possible more revenue requirements to meet the concerns raised by poverty over the next 3 or 4 years?
Okay, so Councillor Dale, thanks for that question. So the MTFP, Council's medium-term financial plan, takes account of risks associated with demand for services and therefore future expenditure. There isn't a direct link to the Treasury management strategy. I think your question is more about, has the council made provision within its budget plans and its medium-term financial plan for the likelihood of those demands arising on council resources? And I think that's a slightly different debate than I mean, clearly those figures in terms of expected future expenditure do flow through into the Treasury management strategy, but I think that's a rather different question.
Well, I could put it actually the other way, is the capital strategy over, are we overspending on capital to ensure that we, don't worry, I mean, that's the other way of looking at it. But it was just something that I strike at the moment was very difficult, and I believe, obviously, when you're putting the long-term strategy MTPI together, it's very difficult to forecast because of these massive risks we have, and there are considerable.
Indeed, and the affordability of the capital programme is a key consideration when setting the budget. As I say, in normal circumstances, we would probably not be able to afford to significantly increase the capital programme at the present time, not least because as I'm sure members are aware, there is considerable uncertainty about the future funding arrangements for councils, with a significant review of the funding system about to get underway. But as I said, you know, we have significant flexibility at the moment because of the high level of reserves and cash balances. And on a one-off basis, I've taken the view that an increase in capital expenditure is affordable, but I don't think the council can continue to invest in its capital programme at the level that it has in recent years, and that is a significant consideration, you know, for our future plans.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you, Jan. I've got 2 more questions. Peter, you had a question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Yeah, this was page 14, the portfolio position, and I was particularly interested in the lender option, borrower option, LOBO exposure, and I just wondered if someone can give me some definition on how any risk might be mitigated there. I suppose what I'm asking is, if interest rates rise and the LOBO lenders proposed an increase in rates and we wanted to then get out of one of these particular financial instruments, do we have a strategy for doing that? And that might be liquid assets, liquid deposits that we could use. So it's just what's the risk mitigation of someone calling in a LOBO?
So given that we're in a significantly under-borrowed position, you know, we would be able to cope with that eventuality. In all likelihood, I think we would replace the LOBO loans with PWLB borrowing. But perhaps I could hand over to my colleague Andy Stewart to just explain a bit more about where we are with the LOBO loans.
Yep, that would be fine. Thank you.
Thanks, Jan. Yeah, I think you summed up the position previously there. I think the report sets out that we've got 176.5 million worth of LOBO loans at present. And as was highlighted before, there is actually options within those LOBOs for the lender to actually increase interest rates at specific points. However, I think you know, we actually get the option if they sort of invoke that clause within the LOBO to either accept the increased interest rate, or actually we can actually repay the borrower. And I think, as Jan set out before, I think our option really and our risk mitigation would be to replace that borrowing with PWLB borrowing. And I think at present, albeit at the time when we originally took out the LOBO, our particular LOBOs, the average interest rate on those is currently sitting at I think it's about 2.95%. So if we had to replace those at present time, the likelihood is that we would be able to get cheaper borrowing from the PWLB.
Okay, thank you. Peter, does that answer your question? Okay, thank you. I had one more question from the far right. Councillor, you had a question.
Yeah, Councillor Sessford. Yeah, I just want to tidy things up later on in the report, actually. It's page 31, it mentions training. It says that all members should be ensure that members with responsibility receive adequate training, especially members responsible for scrutiny. Now it says here that training was last given in October 2018. Actually, that was the year before, but I'm happy to be corrected on that. And especially with, you know, people chopping and changing all over the place, which could be down to the fact that they're not comfortable with everything that we receive here. So I think it's probably time that some training was put in for this, just to make members feel a bit more comfortable in this, and other members. I'm not saying it just has to be for this. It could be. I think the last training was actually full members, but I could be wrong on that as well.
Okay, well, thank you. I think that's more of a sort of a general point. I'm not sure if that's actually so much a question for them. Yeah, just to tell you. Yeah, thank you. Okay, right. Any more questions for the Section 151 officer, or indeed colleagues? No? Okay, well, thank you. Jan, are you still on the line?
I am, Chair.
Good. Jan, are you intending to stay through to the end of this meeting, or is this you done at this point?
No, I'm planning to stay, but I think my colleagues will probably depart at this point.
Okay. Well, can you stay on for one question from myself at the end of this, because we'll tie this item off. But this just follows up on something from previous meeting. So let's tie this particular item off, agenda item 4. We're asked to consider the report, recommend the County Council approves the Treasury Management Strategy statement. We're asked to recommend that the County Council approves the prudential indicators in Appendix 4. And we're asked to recommend that the County Council approves the minimum revenue provision in Appendix 5. So we need to propose and second and vote on those. So have we got a proposer for that? Councillor Oliver, seconder, Councillor Dale. Thank you very much. So I take it that we have approved and recommended as requested on these. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Jan, the question I had for you was something subsidiary to this and not actually directly related to this issue, but as you're on the line, it was worth asking. You may remember that we asked several meetings ago, I think it was probably July, for a report which was produced by KPMG, which was going to come to this committee for a review. And I think Councillor Oliver has been in communication with you recently about that report. We're still waiting for it. Can you give us an indication of when we might receive it, please?
Unfortunately, Chair, I'm not in a position to release that report because it is part of the evidence for an ongoing police investigation, and I'm afraid I'm not in a position to give a timescale about when that report might be available to be circulated to members of the committee. Okay.
Right. Well, I think that probably explains the delay. Obviously, we can't get the report if it's a part of a police investigation. Has this investigation just recently happened, Jan? Is this something quite recent? Because we requested the report in July, and obviously it didn't appear. So did the investigation come subsequent to July?
No, it didn't, Chair. It's an ongoing investigation, as I understand. It's been ongoing for some time. Okay.
This report actually is part of the body of evidence, I take it, that's going to that investigation?
Indeed, Chair. It was a forensic audit report that was commissioned specifically as part of that investigation. Okay.
Well, that answers that question. I hope that satisfies committee about where we are with that one, because obviously we were slightly concerned that it had taken so long to get the report through to us. So obviously there's been a communication failure there. Thank you for that, Jan. Well, in terms of item 4, thank you for presenting that. That's been agreed, and we move on from that. So thank you very much. Okay, agenda item 5, which is the report of the Acting Chief Internal Auditor. So, Kevin, over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, this is just a quite short administrative report to the committee today. In January every year, we bring this report to committee. As members will be aware, we and I produce an annual audit plan each year, which we bring to the March meeting of committee. We are obviously in the process of now commencing that work and developing our plan for 22-23. And as part of that process, we just bring this report to committee each January just to outline the process that we will be following, and that I, as the Chief Internal Auditor, will be required to follow in formulating that plan ready for the coming year. There's no change to the approach, Chair. It's exactly the same as we do every year. It's for Audit Committee's information, as well as just asking or inviting Audit Committee members for any areas which they would like to suggest for my consideration as part of that audit plan. Obviously, that invitation is there all year round. It's formalised somewhat in the January point in the meeting, and I'm more than happy to receive any suggestions from members either today or perhaps following the meeting afterwards. I know, Chair, last 12 months ago, when we were formulating the plan for the current year, as part of that engagement process in developing the plan, we had a briefing session with members of the committee, which I think was well received by members of the committee, and would certainly propose to do that again this year, Chair. And I think we're in the process of just identifying some possible dates for that, so that would give another forum for committee members just to have a bit of a discussion around what may, or perhaps more importantly, what may not form part of the plan, and discuss reasons why that isn't necessarily the case. But happy to take any questions, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Kevin. And certainly from my own point of view, I was at that meeting, as you mentioned last year, and that was very, very useful. I think the key thing was that things aren't being presented to the committee as set in stone at that meeting. It's not a case of here's the plan, live with it. It was very much a case of this is the sort of the draft straw man, if you like, of the plan, and let's see if we can refine it and put it in. I'm not a fan of committees actually sort of just shouting out things to include in audit plans in the middle of a meeting, to be quite honest. It seems a little bit ad hoc. But I think if we have time to think about what we want from that meeting, and we go in with a sort of almost a blank sheet of paper, I think we can actually do something really useful in that sphere.
Of course, Chair. And what I'll be able to do at that meeting is obviously outline the indicative plan at that point in time, and why certain things are included, perhaps certain other things are not included, as part of that formulation of the plan, which I'm required to do ready for the March meeting.
So, but there will be sufficient wriggle room in your resources to actually include anything that the committee actually particularly would like to see in the plan for the year going forward?
Potentially so, Chair, yes. I think I am not duty bound to definitely include those suggestions, but I am duty bound to consider them as part of the plan, and if I don't include them, obviously explain my reasons as to why.
So the meeting won't be a case of here's the plan, you just have to accept it and rubber stamp it. It's a case of here's the plan, but it can be amended,
Yes.
it can be improved.
And Chair, I think as members of the committee will know, a plan is always a plan at a point in time, and that plan does need to flex and change throughout the year to take regard of any emerging risk issues which may be brought to audit's attention, which are not at our attention at the point in March where we form that plan.
Absolutely. Okay, well, I'll open this up for questions, and it seems fairly straightforward in terms of the report. And Councillor Dale, you have.
Right, thank you. Can I just ask you, page 91, Kevin, sorry, B, where it just mentions the partner organisation of a shared internal audit and risk management service, North Tyneside Council. Can you just tell me how much work we're actually still doing with the North Tyneside Council? Because actually I'm not in the loop any longer. Well, I've been out of the loop, so it would just be nice to have an update, please. Is that possible? Thank you.
Yes, Chair. Yes, Councillor Dale, yes, as you rightly say, and when we talk about in mentioned in the report there, at the current time we have a shared internal audit and risk management service with North Tyneside Council. Now that, as other committee members will be aware, there was a report came to a previous meeting of the committee. That shared service is actually ending on the 31st of March of this year.
Right.
So we have left that in this report because we will obviously use that shared intelligence as part of forming the report by the end of March. But obviously when we bring this report to committee next year, obviously that part won't be in because we won't be in the shared service. So will then be an in-house team solely for the County Council's benefit.
Thank you for that clarification.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any more questions? Councillor Oliver.
Just, just a question about how we sort of make suggestions as committee members for things to be included in the strategic audit plan. Should we just email Kevin and copy you and the deputy chair in as with any ideas, so that we don't get into a situation where we're shouting out suggestions at meetings? And
Well, I think that's one way of doing it. Kevin, does that work for you? I think the key thing is everybody keeps sight of what other people are saying in these suggestions.
just copy the whole committee in then, and
why not? Does that work for everybody? I'd rather not sort of look like there was a star chamber attached to this, who are getting all these suggestions and nobody else was seeing them. So everybody's got everybody else's email. Why not just do it as a committee?
Chair, I'm happy with whichever way yourself and Councillor Oliver and indeed other members are content. I guess the only thing would be if it was separate, we may get the same thing coming in 3-4 times. So if members want to include all members of committee for completeness, I'm comfortable.
Well, I think that would work. I think everybody at least then is sighted of everything that everybody else is saying. I think I'd rather not have kind of a...
We don't want a star chamber. That would be
certainly
North Korean.
Certainly don't. So if everybody's happy with that approach, we'll try that and see, because it's a new way of doing things. We didn't do this before, but let's try and see if it works. But I think that's the best way. I'm certainly not a big fan of people just doing suggestions off the hoof in the middle of a meeting, because that doesn't tend to get us very far, I don't think. So we've got a date, I think, in mind for this, Kevin, for this pre-meeting. Is it sometime in March?
Yes, Chair, I think we're looking at a date in March as a potential, which will, if that hasn't happened already, we'll certainly seek availability for.
Right, well, I seriously recommend we try to attend that one if we've got the time available, because I attended last year and it was very, very useful, I think. Okay, any more questions on this particular item? Okay, well, if nobody has any more questions, then well, thank you very much for that, Kevin. I think we have to, do we have to consider and endorse the approach? I think we do have to endorse your approach, don't we? Okay, do I have a proposer for that? Do we propose? Councillor Jackson, and seconded by Councillor Oliver. Thank you. So we have duly endorsed your approach, Kevin. Thank you.
Thank you.
Yeah. Okay, so moving on to item number 6. This is the report of the Executive Director of Adult Social Care and Children's Services into the review of external inspection reports, adults and children's services. So it's item 6 in your pack. Thank you. Who's presenting this?
That's me, Chair.
Thank you. Thank you.
Good morning, I'm Alan Hartwell and I'm presenting this report on behalf of Kath McAvoy-Carr. It's the latest in a series of reports that comes every 6 months to this committee, and its focus is external inspections that take place across adult social care and also within children's services. And it's the Care Quality Commission who undertake inspections for adult social care, and predominantly it is Ofsted who undertake inspections across children's services. The period that this report covers, it does bring us up to date. So this report covers the period from the start of July 2021 to the end of December 2021. Because of the submission dates for this report, I do have some updates, Chair, which I can mention verbally at the end of this meeting, just in terms of published reports. So in terms of the coverage of this report, as I say, it does cover inspection activity across adult social care, and within children's services, it looks at children's residential homes, it looks at inspections of schools, which are ongoing, early years inspections, which are ongoing, and also an update on the multi-agency joint targeted area inspection, the JTI, which took place in summer 2019. In terms of the highlights that the report refers to, it's a positive picture. Across adult social care, there's been a near 4% improvement in the proportion of services and settings that are now judged at the end of December as being good or outstanding. That's increased from nearly 84% to over 87%. And the report includes details of which services and settings have been involved, have been inspected during that period, which ones have improved their rating and those which haven't. And it also alludes to the monitoring arrangements that the local authority undertakes. Moving to children's services, it's also a positive picture in terms of improvements in the proportion of schools that are judged to be good or outstanding, both within the primary sector and within the secondary sector. And it also presents the picture with regards to early years services where inspections are ongoing, and there's a very high number of those early years services who are judged to be good or outstanding. And the report refers to the support arrangements that have been provided to early years providers over the course of the pandemic, both in terms of morale and supportive arrangements, but also practical and technical help as well. The report does refer to the joint targeted area inspection. As I mentioned, that was summer 2019, and the action plan that arose from that has been subject to quarterly monitoring through the Children's Safeguarding Board arrangements through the partnership, and the actions within that action plan were fully signed off at the last meeting of the Northumberland Safeguarding Children Committee, which took place in January. If I can, Chair, just mention some of those updates that are referred to. A general update that there will be a report going to the Family and Children Scrutiny Committee at the start of February, which is an overall report about inspection frameworks per se in children's services, that basically pulls it all together, provides the latest position, but also what we think the future holds and some kind of indicative timescale as well, so that Scrutiny Committee can see that information. As part of that report, it also refers to what we understand probably the next inspection activity will be within the local authority children's services. So whereas we know that inspections of schools and early years and residential homes will continue as per the Ofsted schedule. What we are expecting is a focused visit for the local authority children's social care sometime within the next year, and that can be around children who are looked after. It can be around permanency. It can be about the front door and referral receipt arrangements. It can be about child protection arrangements, etc. So we are expecting a short, focused visit from Ofsted. That's an ungraded inspection, but we're expecting that within the next year. And also the inspection of the Youth Justice Service is actually overdue. That's undertaken by the Probation Inspectorate, and we are also anticipating that will be received as well. Finally, Chair, just to mention those updates that have taken place since this report was submitted. The report does refer to the inspection of Barndale House, which took place in December, and we do have that report now, and that resulted in a judgment of good for Barndale House. And we also learnt yesterday that Ofsted arrived at Phoenix House, which is one of our children's residential homes. So Phoenix House is currently being inspected as we speak. And that brings us up to date, Chair, in terms of the position within adult social care and children's services. Happy to answer any questions. If there's anything of a specific technical nature, I'm also happy to take those back to colleagues.
Okay, well, thank you for that, Alan. And I've got to say straight off, it is a very encouraging report. And I read this report and I was quite surprised actually at how so much has improved over the period even of the pandemic, which in itself was a surprise and a very pleasant surprise. I'm not sure, was that an expected improvement over that period, or was did that surprise yourselves?
I think the inspection activity has really just gathered pace since the summer. So there has been considerable inspection activity over the last period. And I think that with regards to the schools, I think yes, I think that was inspected. I think the information and the intelligence that the local authority school improvement team would support that. Likewise with early years, and likewise within adult social care as well. There's close monitoring arrangements where there needs to be with those services that did deteriorate from a good or outstanding rating to below that. And so the local authority has a good understanding of where those pinch points are and what support those services need, and also has, therefore, I think, a good understanding of where those services are positioned in terms of what their next inspection rating is likely to be. Okay,
so this didn't come as a complete surprise to you, but it was still a welcome result all the same.
Yes, that's
so
right.
Things are going in the right direction. Okay, questions, Councillor Dale. I think I saw your hand
Sorry,
first.
just very quickly,
Councillor next.
can you tell me how many high schools still work under Northumberland County Council and are not academies, or are they all academies now?
No, they're not all academies. No, it's a split. In terms of, I haven't got the exact numbers with me, which I'd be happy to get. But there are a considerable number of academies, but there are also some that are still LA maintained.
Only because I have to say Berwick Academy stands out.
Yes.
It's just been so long term, and just the problems have gone on, and we still get the same reports every year. So it's just something to note. It is difficult.
Yes, certainly, yes. And obviously the report does note the inspection that took place at Berwick, and it did change grading from inadequate to requires improvement. But yes, improvements still need to be made.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Towns, I saw his hand up next.
Thank you, Chair. On children's residential homes, I'm aware that the council is planning to build at least two, I think, one at Pegswood, one I think at Hadston, and I believe the Pegswood one has now received planning permission. Just if we could have an update on when construction and completion of those facilities will be, but also just a quick question as to whether or not the council is planning to build any more of its own children's residential homes, because I think the financial case as well as the level of care case for doing so makes sense in both aspects.
Okay. Yes.
Thank you. I'm afraid I don't have the specific details in terms of timescales with me, but I'd be happy to go back and seek that information out and provide it for the minutes.
If you could,
Yeah,
that would be good. Thank you.
Yes.
I saw Councillor Sesswood's hand up, I think, and then Councillor, you next.
Thank you. Hi, Alan. Obviously, I'm used to receiving lots of reports of you in the Facts Committee, and always look forward to them. I just want to have a look at the information on the adult social care inspection. And if I look at the top, I think 9, I think it is, they've all changed. And, you know, it just seems like I'm not used to everything just changing on block like that. I haven't seen quite a few of these reports before. Are any of these sort of either the requirement requires improvement, which 2 are now and 7 were previously, or the good? Have the inspections changed due to COVID? Were any of these actually COVID affected? and now they've settled down a bit. It seems it's unusual for them to all have a change like that.
I think it's fair to say that there has been an element of COVID affected within inspections, and I think where that has occurred, then sometimes I think the report alludes to the point that the Care Quality Commission is considering that, and is considering those services that are judged to be requires improvement, and sometimes changing the schedule to actually inspect those services. So it's in recognition of the fact that some of the inspections that have taken place and some of those settings obviously have been affected by the pandemic. And in terms of the just the numbers of inspections taking place, obviously there was a very long period of time where inspection activity was a lot less. But since the summer, it's very much been gathered pace. So hence the information in the block, as you refer to.
I'm just wondering. There's only 6 months in between these ratings, and I was just wondering if we'd had maybe a year ago, or a year and a half, or 2 years ago, whether we could see whether a school was sliding down or up. You know, whether this is just a blip, or because it's quite hard to get a pattern here with only sort of 6 months in between them.
Absolutely. I'd easily be able to find that information out. I could probably find that information out before the end of this meeting. Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you, Alan. If you could, that would be useful to have that. I think I've got a question. Councillor, you had your hand up first, and I'll come to you, Councillor Oliver, next.
Thanks, Chair. I apologise, I'm not a member of the Facts Review and Scrutiny Committee, so perhaps my question should really be directed to that body. But the Quality Care Commission, when they do an inspection, what does that actually mean? For example, I'm aware where the Gables Care Home is. A lot of members won't be aware of where it is. The former doctor's surgery. It's quite an old building, Chair. Do they look at the fabric of the building, for example? Do they look at the security of the building? What, in a nutshell, briefly, from my understanding, what does the inspectors look at?
Thank you. Generally, they look at the leadership and management. They look at issues like, say, safeguarding and any reporting incidents. They also look at health and well-being issues and just the overall level of care as well. And they do also consider issues around the fabric of the building, as you mentioned as well.
Thank you, Chair. That's helpful. Thank you.
Okay, it's helpful for me, to be quite honest, because I don't know exactly the detail of what goes into these inspections. Have we had anywhere the inspection has come back and mentioned the fabric of the building, just on your knowledge, Alan?
Not to my specific knowledge. Again, I could ask that information and bring that back. I'm not aware of any.
Because I'm not up to speed with what the fabric of the building is like for a lot of these establishments, but I would imagine we have got quite a lot in that kind of category that are quite old and dilapidated, as you say, and I'm just wondering whether they actually make a note of this and whether you'd expect to see more coming through.
And obviously issues around things like, say, health and safety, for example, obviously that is considered. I could certainly ask that question to colleagues in adult services.
Yeah, it's probably worth pursuing that. Sorry, yes, Daljeet, Chief Executive.
With your permission, I think there's a differential about services that the council operates directly. We have very little adult social care, which is residential, because we haven't run care homes for many years. All of the providers are independent, not for profit or private, and they're the registered individuals for any inspection of service. We're the commissioner of the care, but they are the registered provider and responsible. So if you go on the CQC website and put the name of any service in, it brings up their most recent reports, well, all of their reports and their history. So it will tell you who owns it, who's responsible for it as the registered manager, who's the proprietor, and what the issues are. But as a council, we have very limited care provision directly currently. That might assist members.
It is interesting. It's one of those things where things fall between different organisations, don't they, these days, nobody has that thing. It's just an interesting point that you made, I think, about the fabric of the building and how much is that actually improved, because we know that we look at all sorts of things like safeguarding and all the rest of it, and leadership and all these other slightly less tangible things, but the actual fabric of the building is something which is quite interesting.
Chair, sorry. My real concern was something Councillor Dale mentioned with Jan. We all know the schools are suffering badly with excessive costs in power, heating, electricity. I'm quietly confident the care homes, looking after the most elderly and vulnerable, especially in an old building, will be suffering likewise. And that's the sort of thing I was wondering if the Quality Care Commission looked at, if it was adequate in that respect. I had a school chair 2 weeks ago, was operating at 12 degrees. 12 degrees, and I'm sure some care homes is probably doing the same, but if they're not inspected thoroughly and regular, they can get away with things. I hope that's not true.
Well, okay, well, I think we left it with you, Alan, to see if we can dig out some information on that, to see if there's anything ever come up in that respect.
Yeah, certainly.
Yes, yeah, that could sort of close that question off a little bit.
With permission, Chair, I guess an example could be, this may be helpful. For example, when we've been talking about things like, say, health and safety fabric, for example, so there was one inspection within the period where it looked at, say, fire safety issues within the building, and I guess we would obviously expect that the Care Quality Commission would assess things like that, and obviously that can have reference to the fabric of a building, that if it's about structure, for example, or any particular hazards, that they would look at that in terms of fire safety.
Okay, that's great. Thank you for that. Okay, well, I think Councillor Oliver, I saw your hand up just a few minutes ago.
Thank you. It was really just following on from a question Councillor Dale asked, which was around academised schools. So, you know, if there's say an academy that is also a high school, so a large school, main education provider for all the children in that area, and it's not doing very well, do we as an authority wield any influence at all? Can we, I mean, we're not directly responsible for that, I realise that, but are there any tools that we can use to try and help the improvement of standards in that school?
Yeah, thank you.
Okay, thank you. The answer is yes. We offer we offer the school improvement service level agreement. We can offer basically the same level of service to academies who wish to buy in that we would provide to local authority maintained schools, and we also have other structures in place. So there is an education strategy board. There was actually just a meeting of that on Monday, where members from academies are part of that, just as they are from local authority maintained schools as well. And there's regular head teacher briefings, for example. When inspections take place, the local authority do offer their support. They're in regular contact with regional schools, the regional schools commissioner as well, in terms of supporting academies. So yes, the short answer is yes.
Okay, thank you. Two more. We've got Councillor Dale and
I'd like to ask another question, sorry, because it was just to say, when I think I used to go around doing the county council inspections in care homes and Bardale everywhere, but that stopped there, I believe. And also, this was a member representative, the government, I think, stopped that. But also, I think you bring up a very good question about the academies. And I do have concerns about somehow the way that children, over a long period of time, if I take Barrack Academy, the education there has been less than desirable for all children. And that's going back to 2008. That's when I can recall it. So it is a problem when you can't get to grips and you've only got certain powers that you can actually do, and that is whether they'll listen or not. So it is a very difficult position to be in for having, because it actually does come down on the county council in some small way. These are ongoing issues. Anyway, thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you. Peter, you had one question.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. Just I was just looking at where it says key issues, the second bullet point, and it says about Kylo House in Staddington. It says where satisfactory progress was found, and I was just wondering if you could help me. What satisfactory progress towards what? What's the next stage there?
Well, because it was an interim inspection, and what that was referring to was in terms of the view about when the next full inspection takes place, about whether progress on any actions that have been required, whether they've been effectively implemented or whether they are en route to being effectively implemented. So that's the reason for the reference for satisfactory progress, because it's basically a prelude to the next full inspection, which would be a graded inspection.
Thank you. Okay, thank you. Is that okay, Peter? Right. If there's no more questions, I can't see any hands up. Well, I would like to thank you, Alan, for presenting that. Very positive report, and thank you also for agreeing to get that extra little bit of information for us that has been requested by the committee. So thank you for attending.
Will do.
Okay, so we move on to item number 7, which is the report of the external auditor, and Cameron Waddell from Azars is here to present that. Cameron.
First thing to say, Chair, is the first thing is just to apologise that we haven't actually got a written report. It's mainly due to long-term sickness of the manager, who we hope will be back soon. In the meantime, the team have been cracking on with the audit of the accounts, so we are in a position we should be able to report to the next committee about the accounts in particular. Generally speaking, the work to date hasn't identified any significant issues, with the exception of the valuation of schools, where we have identified what appears to be an issue, and we're not sure whether or not it's a lack of evidence to support the valuations or whether the valuations themselves are incorrect, or both, if that makes sense. So we need the evidence to support the valuations. If we can't get the evidence, we'll need to request something to be done to get that evidence. If we get the evidence that doesn't support the valuations, then there's an error, and therefore something else will have to be done. Does that make sense? Yeah,
it does make sense.
So,
are you having a problem getting the evidence? Is
this it seems to be a lot of. I'm not going to try and explain to you the way that a DRC valuation is done as a primer of a school, because we'll be here for quite a long time. But there are certain things that are done at a point in time that leads to something called the modern equivalent asset valuation basis, and that is basically the way you value a school using DRC. Yep. It's either floor areas being floor areas you'd need for that school, not necessarily the floor areas that are actually in place, or people numbers, essentially. So at some point in time, somebody within the council almost certainly would have provided the value with information around about either floor areas or people numbers. It's just getting under the skin of that and understanding what's been given and what the basis for that was. That's what's causing a bit of a hold up in terms of that. We've parked that for now, left it with officers, and we've moved on and started doing other work, because that's the best way to do it. And then we'll wait until things come back on that. So it's not the same issue as we had last year in some of the valuations. Well, it's not entirely the same issue, but it may be something that the council needs to take some action to get that evidence to us, if it can't be found or it doesn't support the valuations in the accounts.
From a slightly naive point of view, that information that creates that evidence, it sounds like it should be fairly straightforward and should be readily available. Am I being naive in thinking that?
Well, this isn't an uncommon issue, is probably the best way to put it. Because particularly where things are done at a point in time, then that's rolled forward for quite a few years, then holding on to that sometimes can be an issue, subject to how long ago it was. Because I think people think that valuers just go off and value things based on stuff they do themselves, but they don't. They actually rely on quite a lot of information that's provided to them by their clients. At this stage, we think it's the information that's been provided to the valuer that's the problem. But we're still, like I say, unpicking it. It has, by the way, just in case anybody's worried about it, it would have absolutely no bottom line impact in terms of the accounts. Make no difference to the underlying level of reserves the council holds to fund future services. It doesn't impact on that. It's purely to do with the balance sheet, which then flows through to the CIS if it's wrong. But all of the impact on that would be reversed out through the statutory override. So it might be quite a big error. We don't know yet. If it is, we'll report that through to the audit committee in due course. But at the moment, that's the main thing that's coming out of the audit.
Okay.
In terms of 1920 VFM, we are still looking at international. That's still a key area for focus. We still haven't got all the information that we've requested. We had a quick chat with Jan yesterday around about some of the information that's still outstanding in relation to some contracts and various other bits and pieces to get that underlying evidence that we need to pull the whole picture together. And we're still considering the implications around about the constitutional issues we've discussed previously on relation to that. It's underway, but I don't think I'm in a position really to be absolutely clear about when that will be finished. The same applies to 2021 in terms of value for money. But you'll remember, Chair, that the code changed last year. So last year the code moves from an unqualified, qualified VFM conclusion to have you identified a significant weakness in arrangements? If you have, are you going to issue a significant recommendation? And that work's underway as well at the same time.
Okay. Right. Yeah, thank you.
Well, one thing we have done since the last committee is we signed off the whole of government accounts return, finally, just before it got closed by HMT. So that was submitted in, I think it was about the 15th or 16th of December. So then you'll have that, because there was a lot, I think the council was getting a bit of grief, and we were getting a bit of grief around about that as well, understandably, because it was quite late. But that's all done and dusted now for 1920.
Excellent. Excellent. Well, we've got a couple of hands up. I saw Councillor Townsend. I think I saw first Councillor Dale. So, do you have your hand up?
Yeah, can I go back to the, sorry, I'm asking a question, but I just want to get some basic answer. Going back to the schools, there was a recent law case concerning academisation, or academies, where new schools have been built by the county council, and then they were obviously transferred to the academy. And the court case was that, in fact, once those the buildings had been transferred, when the academy was set up, or if it was an academy and they built a school for an academy, that academy land and whatever ownership it had, if they sold it in the years to come, that actual property and land still belonged to the academy and didn't revert back to the council. And the cost. The issue that's been raised with me is the cost that the county council are putting in to building new schools for academy, and the cost of the interest on that for the taxpayer for years to come. And obviously it'll be long term, because we've had schools being bought and built in 1960, 70, and we're still probably paid them off by now, but hopefully. But it was just the amount of money, and I think that would be an interesting conversation, because there's a lot of money, a lot of council, well, it's a lot of residents, council taxpayers' money that is actually being provided for the academies, but they don't have any ownership afterwards, but we're still paying interest on it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
There's not really very much to say.
It's not really.
No, I mean,
it's not really a question for you to actually
no,
give us an answer on camera.
That,
I'm sure it would be good if you could, but I think it is. We are where we are with this. I think that's the answer to that. Thank you.
Clearly, if something was raised by a member of the public in terms of accounting treatment or something, that's something we'd look at in relation to the context of the audit, but nothing to that. Yeah. Nothing along those lines has ever been raised with us since we've been the council's auditors. So.
Okay, that's fine. Thank you. Thank you, Councillor. Councillor Towns, you had a question.
Thank you, Chair. We heard from the Section 151 officer that there's an ongoing police investigation, which seems to revolve around, or at least cover, advance. I don't know if I'm the only one in the room who found that slightly surprising, but obviously we have been advised that that is the case. Does your annual report take that into consideration as an area of potential risk for the council?
So I'm not going to comment on ongoing police investigations for obvious reasons. But where Northumberland Police look into something and do something, then we would clearly take account of that in the context of our audit. Normally it would be in relation to the value for money conclusion, for obvious reasons, if it was something specific. If there was something that might have an impact on the accounts, then that's clearly something we would discuss with Jan in our Section 151 role going forward as well. But I can't really comment on any ongoing police investigations, as you would expect, I think.
Okay, thank you, Cameron. I think that's fairly clear. Okay, any more questions? Councillor Oliver.
Thank you, Chair. You mentioned that the 1920 VFM conclusion still hadn't been reached, and I was going to ask about that. But I'm concerned that that VFM conclusion, had it followed its normal timetable, would have been done either in September or November 2020. I think probably November.
But it wouldn't have been, Councillor Oliver, because we didn't sign the audit of the accounts off until.
Yeah, but had everything else gone, that was the sort of the original timetable. And I know that in January 21, so a year ago now, the then, Jan's predecessor had, told me in a briefing that the council was preparing information on the international business that you as auditors had requested. A year later, you still haven't got that information?
We've got a significant chunk of information,
Right.
but there are still some follow-up queries based on what we have been provided to date, Councillor Oliver.
And are you facing any sort of resistance? I mean, I'm going to be blunt about it.
I don't think so. I think it's just finding it seems
Right.
to be part of the issue.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, well, if there are no more questions for Cameron, well, thank you for that verbal report, Cameron, and we'll conclude that issue. Number 8 on the items is urgent business. We haven't got any urgent business in this meeting, so it's just down to saying that the date and the time of the next meeting is scheduled for Wednesday, the 23rd of March at the usual time of 10:15. And thank you for attending. We now move into part 2,